Construction nears completion on China's first third-generation nuclear power station. That is also the largest joint energy project with the United States. U.S. Special Envoy Glenn Davis and his Japanese counterpart meet in Tokyo. They urged the DPRK not to carry out a new nuclear test. Activists report more fighting between government forces and rebels around the Syrian capital Damascus. And protesters in Egypt defy a curfew ordered by the president, with many carrying out nighttime attacks on police stations along Suez Canal. Hello there, welcome to News Hour on CCTV News. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Deng. China is on course to build its first ever third-generation nuclear power plant in Sanmen in East China's Zhejiang province. The technology at the core of the plant is known as AP1000, a US-developed third-generation technology that's at heart of the largest ever China-US energy project. Ying Yiyuan reports.
A last inspection for this 800-ton steel structure. This containment vessel will be lifted up to a height of 65 meters to cap's nuclear power unit. It marks the completion of the main structure. The reactor and the steam generator are already sitting inside, waiting to be installed. 3 years on from the beginning of the project, the security remains very tight.
We follow the rules of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission as well as China's own nuclear safety laws and regulations. Our team consists of talented people from both China and the U.S., and we have a comprehensive system of quality control.
Since Japan's Fukushima disaster, preventing cooling system failure has become a key safety priority for the nuclear industry worldwide. The Sanmen plant uses US AP1000 technology, otherwise known as third-generation nuclear technology. It means the plant's emergency cooling system can function without electricity for 3 days.
Third generation is, according to the such kind of PSA analysis, is 100 times more safer than the generation 2. They can actually operate without any power, and they just be forced by the gravity, natural circulations, so they can make these systems works very well.
The Sanmen plant will start generating electricity in 2014 and is expected to supply 15% of Zhejiang province electricity by 2015. It's a part of China's overall plan to increase the proportion of nuclear power to 4% by 2020, double the current level.
The electricity made by one nuclear unit here can save 3 million tons of coal and decrease carbon emissions by 8 million tons.
Different countries hold different opinions on nuclear power development, especially after Fukushima accident. However, developing clean and efficient energy is always a common goal for everyone, and ensuring safety is always a top priority. Ying Yiyuan, CCTV, Sanmen County, Zhejiang Province.
For more on the third-generation nuclear power plant, our reporter Ying Yiyuan has interviewed the managing director of the Westinghouse Industrial Products and general manager of China's State Nuclear Power Technology Corporation. Let's take a look.
Mr. Allen, so we know after Fukushima accident that different countries have different opinions on developing nuclear energy. But China and the US, both of them, they decide to increase the production of nuclear energy. So what are the reasons?
Well, we actually decided to continue. We had, even before Fukushima, worked closely. And during Fukushima, I actually was in Japan and lived through the experience. And so while we had already begun the projects here, both at Sanmen and Haiyang, after a short period of assessment, we concluded that SNPTC and Westinghouse would go forward because the safe conditions that AP1000 is designed for would withstand the kind of conditions that Fukushima occurred and created. So it endorsed what we had already started, and the design principles for passive safety and the work that we were doing together should go forward And we have done this, and today is a big milestone towards that.
China is the largest developing country with the faster development of an economy. We need power energy. So nuclear power will change the China energy structure, relying mainly on coal to promote the environment condition. Or also, China need to introduce advanced technology to improve China's nuclear technology. Also promote manufacturing industry. So that's why we introduced this AP1000 technology. Also after Fukushima, that also demonstrate this technology will be more important for future development.
For more insight on this, we're joined by Mr. Li Hong. He's the Secretary General of China Arms Control and Disarmament Association. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Li. So what's the significance of this nuclear power plant?
I think there are at least two aspects for the significance of the sealing of the Xiamen nuclear power plant. First of all, it means that the pace of nuclear power construction has resumed to the normal pace after the Fukushima nuclear accident. As we know, after the Fukushima nuclear accident, the pace of nuclear development in China have been significantly slowed down just for the safety concerns. But now, after some period of overall safety inspection, and also after the last October, the adoption of the Chinese nuclear safety plan, the pace seems to be is resuming to the normal speed. Second, the sealing of the Xiamen nuclear power plant safety shell also indicates that China has mastered the key know-how and skills of the third generation nuclear power plant. This is also a very important technical breakthrough for China.
Well, Mr. Li, how do you view China's nuclear energy development, especially on the area of safety and security?
For the nuclear power, I think it is the only way China has to proceed it forward, because we have large population, we have huge electricity demands, and as the economy continue to boom, we need more electricity. The demand is high. So at the current stage, the world's average percentage for nuclear power plant is 16% of the overall electricity capacity. But China at the moment is only 2%. So we need nuclear power plant, and the space for China is great to develop nuclear power. Meantime, safety has proven to be the key life of nuclear power. We have to attach more and more importance and allocate more resources for nuclear safety. And as for China's the challenges on safety, I think there are plenty of them. First of all is we have different approaches for nuclear power plant at different locations. Second, we have a very different kind of nuclear power reactors imported from different countries. The safety standards might also be a little different from each other. The third, I think we have rapidly expanding nuclear power industry, but at the same time, we have very limited skillful professionals. This is also a very serious challenge. We have to attach importance to this issue also. The latest passed nuclear safety plan last October, I think, set great framework for our nuclear power plant the safety construction, and it also stipulated the allocation of resources for this field. I think this is also a very good signal for our nuclear development. Besides, I think China has brought full lessons at different levels, including the government level, the industry level, and the operational level from the nuclear incident at Fukushima.
Thank you very much indeed. That was Mr. Li Hong, Secretary General of the China Arms Control and Disarmament Association. You're watching NewsHour on CCTV News. Coming up. Activists report more fighting between government and rebel forces around Syrian capital Damascus. And protesters in Egypt defy a curfew ordered by the president, with many carrying out nighttime attacks on police stations along the Suez Canal. Japanese officials have met with a visiting U.S. Special Envoy in Tokyo and agreed to closely cooperate to urge the DPRK not to carry out a new nuclear test. Japan's chief nuclear negotiator Shinsuke Sugiyama and U.S. Special Representative on DPRK Glyn Davis confirmed plans for the two countries to press the DPRK to comply with relevant UN Security Council resolutions. They also agreed to cooperate with South Korea, China and Russia. Following their meeting, Davis told media that he was not optimistic about reaching a diplomatic solution with the DPRK of its nuclear program.
We came out to the region hoping to start a new round of, let's call it, let's make a deal. But instead we find a North Korea that seems bent on playing a game of risk. This is very dangerous. We'd like them to step back from this kind of a provocative stance and enable us to get back to a diplomatic process. But I have to be honest with you, as a diplomat, I don't see any prospect.
For more on that, let's talk to our correspondent Terence Terashima in Tokyo. Hello, Terry. Glyn Davis is still in Japan. What's the latest you've got?
Yes, as you just saw, Glyn Davis said it is dangerous for DPRK to threaten the international community with nuclear tests, and it is not productive. Japan and U.S. officials are considering further sanctions if and when DPRK commence with the nuclear tests. And Japan is already considering lowering the money transfer limit to DPRK. And they also agreed on sharing surveillance information and closely monitoring activities in DPRK, and continue to demand DPRK to uphold the September 2005 joint statement. And Glyn Davis also met with the families of the abducted Japanese and expressed U.S. support. The Japanese government will convene again to consider its own actions against DPRK if and when nuclear test is conducted by DPRK.
But Terry, we know that South Korea, the United States and Japan will hold an annual defense meeting in Tokyo on Wednesday. So many are guessing the DPRK issue will be high on their agenda, isn't it?
Yes, definitely so. This is the first Defense Bureau Chief levels talk since the three countries renewed their leadership. U.S. is actually mediating the bilateral relations between Japan and South Korea, as Seoul and Tokyo government have suffered tensions on territorial issues. But the three countries expected to reaffirm coordinations and cooperations in tackling the security in Korean Peninsula. And the United States is hoping that Japan and South Korea will sign a general security military information agreement as soon as possible. But analysts say despite the U.S.'s strong interest in stronger coordination between Tokyo and Seoul, as DPRK is making a progress in developing a long-range ballistic missile, the current Japanese move to reinforce its defense force and roles overseas might not actually go down well with South Korea. So it will be not only in the defense level, but sharing information, but in the government level, it will be further talks on the coordinations of these three countries in tackling the security in Korean Peninsula. Pandam.
Thank you very much indeed, our correspondent Terence Terashima in Tokyo. South Korea is counting down to its third attempt to launch a rocket into space. The Naro has been moved to the launch pad and final preparations are underway. The rocket is expected to be put into space on Wednesday. For more on the launch, let's talk to our correspondent Eugene Jiang, who's at the Naro Space Center in South Korea. Hello, Eugene. You've been following the preparations very closely. What's the latest?
Hi, Pandong. The rehearsal has begun since this morning. We're 4 hours and 30 or 40 minutes into the rehearsal right now. The rehearsal takes place in two different sections, should I say. The first stage of the rehearsal on the first stage started at 9:30 a.m. local time and will last for about 6 hours and 30 minutes. And the rehearsal for the second stage of the rocket will begin in about 10 minutes time and last for 3 hours. So both stages of the rehearsal will come to an end at approximately 4:30 p.m. local time. And from then on, the results will be analyzed, and the results will be announced at 9:30 p.m. local time. So depending on the results of the rehearsal, this may or may not impact or make the date and the time of the launch may or may not be impacted depending on the analysis. Pandong?
Well, Eugene, what kinds of factors will affect the launch, and can they be taken into control?
Well, right now the launch window is set for Wednesday, sometime between 3:55 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. in the evening. They say here that the most likely time for the launch would probably be at 4 p.m. local time, but we'll know for sure tomorrow afternoon at 1:30. Until then, we're still kept in the dark about whether it will really be possible or not. The number one factor right now is the weather. Right now, according to the weather agency, but it doesn't seem, though, as the weather will play a big part, because during that launch window, it seems that there will be no rain or snow, but it will be very cloudy. We're expected to see about 60 to 80% of the sky covered in clouds, but the weather agency says it's not enough to damage any of the rocket device. So if weather is clear and the rehearsal results come out positive, then we might be able to see the rocket launch into space at 4 p.m. local time tomorrow. This is the third attempt. We've seen two failures before, and many times was the launch date postponed. So, I mean, I talked to some of the people, the residents in this area, and they're all hoping that this time the Naro will successfully reach orbit tomorrow. Pandang?
Thank you very much indeed. Our correspondent Eugene Jiang at the Naro Space Center in South Korea. You're watching NewsHour on CCTV News. Stay with us. Turning to Syria now, activists say rebel forces battled government troops in several towns and villages around the capital Damascus on Monday, including Daraya, Abin and Zabadani. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said government forces shelled several of the capital's suburbs. Also on Monday, an al-Qaeda-linked group fighting alongside rebels claimed responsibility for a suicide car bombing last week that reportedly killed dozens of the president's loyalists. A recent UN estimate puts the number of people killed in the violence at more than 60,000 since 2011. A delegation of U.S. officials visited a Syrian refugee camp inside the Jordanian border on Monday. U.S. AIDS Assistant Administrator Nancy Limbaugh and Ann Richard, Assistant Secretary of State for Refugees, met with UN humanitarian agencies and toured the Tari camp. The refugees complained about the living conditions. They said they're seeing tents burnt every day. At a press conference in Amman following the visit, Richard called upon all nations to step forward to help Syrians in their time of need. Lindbergh said that the U.S. would make a significant announcement in Kuwait of additional funding for the Syrian refugees.
We do not have enough aid right now, and that is why we are going to Kuwait, and that is why we are asking other countries to join us. And we are going to make a significant announcement in Kuwait of additional funding.
Turning to Egypt now, protesters defied a nighttime curfew in Ismailia on Monday. Hundreds of protesters ignored President Mohamed Morsi's emergency rule to end days of clashes, which have killed at least 52 people. In Port Said, protesters attacked police stations after dark. A medical source said 2 men were killed and 12 injured in the clashes, including 10 with gunshot wounds. 2 other cities along the canal are also seeing protesters attack police stations. Political opponents spurned a call by Morsi for talks to try to end violence. Meanwhile, Egyptian police have thwarted an attempt by hundreds of inmates to escape from a prison in the coastal city of Suez. Prisoners set fire to the wooden contents of the jails, but policemen controlled the fire and no significant damage occurred. Local media said 1 prisoner was killed. The incident happened after skirmishes broke out between demonstrators and army personnel near the police station. It also follows Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi's declaration on Sunday of a month-long state of emergency for 3 cities along the Suez Canal. Dozens of people have been killed over the past 4 days in protests in the area. You're watching NewsHour on CCTV News. Still to come. The IMF sends a team to Spain for talks that are expected to provide a new assessment of the country's banking reform progress. And we'll look at the growing problem of household debt in South Korea and its potential impact on the economy. This is NewsHour on CCTV News. Heidi joins us now with the latest in biz. Good afternoon, Heidi.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Pandang. Let's get straight to it. The International Monetary Fund has sent a team to Spain on Monday for talks with the government there and private sector representatives on the topic of bank reform. The fund is expected to provide a second assessment on the progress and restructuring of Spain's struggling banking sector. An IMF spokesperson says the mission will publish its preliminary findings at the end of this visit that's scheduled for February 1st. A report will then be submitted for Spanish authorities and the European Commission in early March. Well, closer to home, and China will start publishing a regional breakdown of economy-wide financing flows. This is according to a central bank official. The move is seen as part of the People's Bank of China's efforts to strengthen regulations on shadow financing, that's informal financing, underway in China. The PBOC will start publishing regional data on total social financing, or TSF, a recently developed indicator designed to measure overall corporate fundraising. This is in addition to the existing national TSF, which was launched in 2011 as a broad measure of fundraising by non-financial entities in China. Now, for much of the past decade, China has used data on net new bank loans to gauge the impact of monetary policy. But total social financing, which also includes things like corporate bonds, foreign currency loans and equity fundraising, has now largely supplanted bank loans as a key indicator of what liquidity conditions are looking like here in China. Well, fresh figures out last week show that the pace of growth for China's fiscal revenues slowed sharply by almost 50% in 2012. Let's take a closer look today at the country's fiscal positioning. More public projects were in need of cash injections last year, which further widened that fiscal deficit of the world's second largest economy. Let's get you all the details.
China's fiscal deficit reached a 10-year high of 850 billion yuan in 2012, breaching the government's target of 800 billion yuan. The country's financial position has now been in the red for 5 years in a row. A lagging fiscal income and higher government spending widened the deficit, with education, public housing and the pension system still in need of large cash injection. However, experts say the slowdown of China's growth has also brought down the fiscal revenue.
We estimated that 9% of economic growth is a benchmark. A growth rate higher than that level will accelerate the fiscal income, while a growth pace slower than that, like what China has right now, around 7 to 8%, will dampen the fiscal income growth to single digit.
China's fiscal deficit equals 1.5% of its GDP, which experts say is still far away from the financial cordon of 3% in GDP. And the situation is much better than some of the developed economies. But experts also note that a runaway fiscal deficit is one of the key factors that triggered the Eurozone debt crisis, and that China has to learn from that.
We have room to further widen our fiscal deficit thoughtfully, but we cannot simply say that the space is unlimited just because we have a much lower deficit than some Western economies.
State-owned Bank of Communications estimate that China's physical budget deficit may hit a new high of 1.2 trillion yuan in 2013 fiscal year to shore up the slowing economy. The bank says an increasing deficit will go towards key infrastructure projects, which will benefit taxpayers in return and make room for tax cuts, and as a result, speed up the economic recovery. Xia Cheng, CCTV.
All right, let's go straight to the markets. Asian equities traded higher Tuesday morning with corporate earnings very much in focus. Here in China, the benchmark Shanghai Composite swinging between gains and losses in early trade after Monday's 7-month high. It's currently trading at pretty much flat at the moment, about 0.05% in the green. Energy and telecom stocks were the biggest winners on Tuesday morning after oil traded at near 4-month high in New York overnight. Analysts say the Chinese market is entering consolidation mode at the moment after the recent rally, and a lot of investors will be getting out of the market as Chinese New Year approaches. Chinese stocks have rallied amid signs of a sustained China recovery and also speculation that increased urbanization, remember that's one of the Chinese government's big policy platforms for this year, now this will drive construction demand in Chinese cities. All right, let's take a look at how markets in Japan are trading on Tuesday morning. Yoongi Kang joins us in Tokyo with the latest. Yoongi, great to see you. Shinzo Abe's cabinet is approving the budget for the next financial year. What are analysts saying about how this budget looks right now?
Well, hi there, Heidi. One point which is worth mentioning about the fiscal 2013 budget is that tax receipts are rising and borrowing is falling. Now, it is the first time in 4 years that tax revenues will exceed government bond issuance. Now, that might seem like the government is actually moving towards restoring its fiscal health, but analysts are saying that the improvement is only symbolic, and it's because borrowing is actually on the rise if you take into account an extra 10 trillion yen stimulus approved earlier this month. Now,
dollars worth of shares. Volatility in ICBC shares led Goldman to report a full-year net loss in Asia in 2011, its first since 2008.
All right, Serena, we just spoke about Japanese earnings. It's reporting season in South Korea as well. Sentiment has been not that good lately. So early in the earnings season, are we getting a better idea of whether that might improve?
Well, Heidi, more than 200 companies on the MSCI Asia Pacific Index are scheduled to report earnings this week. Sentiment in Korea is rather gloomy, and outlook is bleak for the first quarter on the back of currency volatility and intensifying competition. Steel giant POSCO is reporting its fourth quarter results today. The stock is down about 0.4% ahead of earnings. The company is expected to post its smallest quarterly profits since it switched accounting rules in 2011, as tepid demand from China and Europe put pressure on prices and margins. Auto stocks in South Korea are seeing the light of day for a change. Moody's has said that ratings of Hyundai and Kia are unaffected by fourth quarter results, which were worse than expected. Those stocks roaring away on the back of that news. Hyundai and sibling Kia are both up in excess of 4%. That's a wrap from me. Over to you in the studio.
All right, a few bright spots to focus on. Serena joining us in Singapore. All right, before we wrap up the markets, let's take a look at how other markets are performing right around the region this morning. All right, well, more woes in South Korea, where ballooning household debt could threaten overall economic growth. South Korean debt is now 3 times the average family's disposable income. To put it in perspective, that's higher than the US, the UK, Germany and Japan. Ratings agency Moody's says the problem cannot be solved in the short term. Our correspondent Eugene Jung explains.
Expensive housing, fall in disposable income, and the slowing economy in general has put South Korean households in a state of debt. The figures continue to increase in 2012. More people took out loans, but less were able to pay interest on time.
증가폭이 절반으로 감소하였습니다.
Household loan default increased slightly by 0.14% due to the slowing economy.
So some may question, how did the household debt issue evolve to such an extent in a country known for its frugal savers in the past? Household debt has snowballed into a national concern that the incoming government has pledged to intervene. President-elect Park Geun-hye proposed pulling together what she calls the National Happiness Fund, worth 18 trillion won, or almost $17 billion to pay principal and interest for the vulnerable social groups. Although Mr. Lim agrees with the principle that households, banks, and the government should work together to solve the issue, he's concerned about moral hazards.
There is a need for the government and financial bodies to solve the issue together, but if the government intervenes, there is a risk for banking institutions to continue expanding loans and households to withhold from paying them off in time.
Mr. Lim also said the current level of household debt in South Korea may not harm the economy immediately, considering the soundness of local banks. But if South Korea should be hit by an external factor, then its economy may not be as resilient as before. Eugene Zhang, CCTV, Seoul.
All right, a difficult dilemma indeed in South Korea. You're up to date with Biz. Join me again at 4 p.m. for Biz Age. In the meantime, here's Pandong with a whole lot more news.
Thank you very much, Heidi, indeed. Turning to China now, haze and fog have disrupted transportation in central and eastern regions of the country. The National Weather Authority says visibility in some provinces was cut to less than 1,000 meters. Beijing has been covered by smog again since Sunday. Air quality indices from most monitoring stations in the city proper exceeded 200, a serious level of air pollution. In the capital city of the northern Hebei province, low visibility has forced 26 flights to be delayed and 14 cancelled. Authorities issued alerts over the decline in air quality and advised residents in these regions to stay indoors or take precautions. Earlier, we talked to our reporter Nie Jia in downtown Beijing. He told us about measures the government has taken to tackle the severe pollution.
The Beijing municipal government has adopted a lot of measures to curb air pollution. One is to adopt tougher emission standards for motor vehicles from February the 1st. And this measure will help to reduce the emission from motor vehicles by about 40%. And this kind of measure will also ensure that the sale and registration of substandard gasoline vehicles be banned from March the 1st. And in addition, the city government also shut down factories. They cut back on coal burning, and they also take certain vehicles off the road when pollution hit unacceptable levels. And so air pollution has become a very hot topic during the sessions of Beijing Municipal Government People's Congress and also the Municipal Committee of the CPPCC. And the lawmakers have also proposed a draft rule on the prevention of air pollution, which is now in the process of soliciting public opinion. But the experts say that to fundamentally resolve the problem from the root cause, we need to reform China's economic development model, to adjust the energy mix, and also to provide adequate legal framework for air pollution control.
Our reporter Nie Jia in downtown Beijing. Now, for more on the abnormal weather, let's talk to Bo Yipun at Weather Center. Hello, Bo Yi. Thank you very much for joining us. What's the latest you've got?
Hi there, a pleasure to see you. Well, as we know, since last weekend, central and eastern China has seen considerable amount of foggy conditions here. And this is the fourth round of fog so far this winter. And not only has it impacted the Hubei region and the Huanghai, but also people in eastern Sichuan through Hunan there. As of this morning, major cities like Shijiazhuang and Jiangzhou had visibility of only 600 meters or even less than that. So this is certainly a concern for many populous areas of China here. And we have also issued a yellow alert here for haze in addition to a blue alert impacting much of the Hubei down through the Huanghai region. So conditions are very poor in terms of visibility and air quality. It is very advisable to wear a mask right now. Back to you.
Good news for us because we're eager to see some clear sky.
Well, I'd love to give you some good news, but it's not looking so good for the next couple of days. We do have a cold front, but it is only impacting northern Xinjiang at the moment. It will be sweeping east and then southeastward into the more populated areas, central and eastern China, but probably not until next month. We are going to see some wet weather picking up tomorrow for southern Shanxi, much of the southern Hubei, Huanghai region, down through the foggy area and hazy area, Sichuan and Hunan, but mainly light intensity. It will be helpful for pushing out the fog and for more of eastern China here for Thursday. Even some moderate to heavy precipitation picking up for southern Shandong, Jiangsu, maybe even Henan there. So better air quality, but if you're looking for clear visibility, probably not until next month, sometime around Friday or this weekend. So do take caution if you are traveling. Back to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Bo Yupun at the National Weather Center. This is News Hour on CCTV News. More to come. Police in southern Brazil arrest 4 people as they continue to investigate a nightclub fire that killed 231 people. And an Indian court rules that one of the 6 suspects in the New Delhi gang rape case will be tried as a teen in a juvenile court. Turning to Brazil now, police have arrested 4 people in connection with the nightclub fire that killed 231 people in southern Brazil. 2 are club owners and the other 2 are members of the band that was performing, but no charges have been filed against them. They will be held initially for 5 days while authorities investigate Sunday's blaze in the Kiss nightclub in Santa Maria. Meanwhile, funeral services have been held for several of the victims. Most were college students, though many were minors. Most died from smoke inhalation rather than burns. Initial reports suggest the tragedy was the result of a series of failures, including no fire alarm, no sprinklers, fire escapes, and 40 extinguishers. Now let's focus on the development of the Indian rape case. The court in India has ruled that one of the 6 people accused of the gang rape and murder of a 23-year-old woman in New Delhi last month is a teenager. He will be tried in a juvenile court. Bi Jianlu has the details.
The Juvenile Justice Board has accepted the elementary school records of the suspect as a proof of age. The records show his birth date as June 4, 1995, making him 17 years old. This means he will be tried in a juvenile court. If convicted, he faces a maximum of 3 years in a reform facility. The ruling shocked the victim's father, who watched the news flash on TV. He said he was in disbelief and questions the ruling. He plans to appeal to the upper court. Meanwhile, 5 other suspects have gone on trial at a specially convened fast-track court and face the death penalty. The case has shocked India and sparked a debate about its treatment of women. The victim, a medical student, was gang raped on a bus on December 16th. She and her male companion were beaten severely. She suffered massive internal injuries and died nearly 2 weeks later. Bi Jianlu, CCTV.
Well, Wang Dong joins us now with the latest in sports. Good afternoon, Wang Dong.
Hello there, Pandong. Yes, indeed. We will start the action from the hardwood. The Chinese Basketball Association. Gilbert Arenas and his Shanghai Sharks were trying so hard. They were hosting the Guangdong Southern Tigers Sunday night. The Sharks were looking to keep their hopes alive of making the CBA playoffs with only 6 rounds to go. However, they must overcome the 7-time champs, say the Guangdong Tigers. They came into the match riding a wave of 12 consecutive victories. Check out the action. Shanghai needed a strong performance from Arenas. The former NBA star had averaged 19 points this season, but missed out more than half of the season due to injury. Guangdong took the win as expected and opened a 9-point lead early on. Like Diogo finished 18 points and 14 rebounds. Arenas with 20 points overall cut the deficit to 6 late in the first quarter. But the Southern Tigers got it going again. Ren Junfei pushed the visitors 12 points ahead. And it was 14 points late in the first half when Yi Jianlian scored on the jam. Shanghai kept it close in the third quarter. DJ White trimmed the lead to 6. However, Guangdong made a 20-0 run in the final quarter. He put the Southern Tigers up by 16. Guangdong finally won it 97-72 to grab their 13th victory there in a row, while Shanghai had failed to make the playoffs. And meanwhile, Tracy McGrady and his Qingdao Eagles were also pushed on the edge of failing to reach the playoffs. The Eagles were taking on the Xinjiang Flying Tigers. Tang Zhongdong scored 19 points for Xinjiang in the first 2 quarters. Chris Daniels kept Qingdao alive and cut the deficit to 6. However, Von Wafer gave Xinjiang a 19-point cushion late in the 3rd quarter. Wafer scored in total 25 points. McGrady looked to keep their hopes alive of coming back, but Dano Jackson helped Xinjiang hold on to their advantage. T-Mac had another solid night with 22 points, but Qingdao fell to Guangdong 122-115 and had their playoff hopes ended. Other games on Sunday night, the Beijing Ducks lost to Jiangsu despite 30 points from Stephen Marbury. Shandong beat Shanxi to take over Beijing on the 2nd seed. Fujian fell to Baiyi. Meanwhile, their rising star Wang Zheling finished with 23 points and 16 rebounds. And time to go to the NBA. The LA Lakers host the OKC Thunder at the Staples Stadium. The LA Lakers actually were looking forward to continuing their strong momentum following their big home thrash against the Utah Jazz. Check it out. Kobe Bryant's easy layup helped the Lakers up by 2. Kobe scored 21 points in the match. Later on, Kobe would assist Paul Gasol to score 2 points. The game was tied at 19 apiece in the 1st quarter. Late in the 4th quarter, Steve Nash came off the bench to stretch the Lakers' lead to 6 points. Nash added 17 points in the game. And with only 1 minute remaining, Kobe would again assist Gasol to score as the Lakers finally sealed the victory 105-96 for their 2nd consecutive victory.
Obviously, we made the 2nd step. We did it the other day. We played the way we wanted to play, and today we just did it against probably the best team in the league, and at least we can see our potential, what we can live up to. But again, it's the 2nd step. We got a long ways to go.
All right, check out other actions on the same night. And here, that day, we saw the LA Clippers arrest their 4-game losing skid, defeating the Portland Trail Blazers. Carmelo Anthony led the New York team there to a tight victory over Atlanta, and Boston had a bittersweet night beating Miami in double OT, but learning that their point guard, Rajon Rondo, will miss the rest of the season. Very unfortunate there. And with a team flag waving from an open window of their chartered plane, the San Francisco 49ers arrived at their first Super Bowl in 18 years on Sunday. The players walked off the airplane in low-key manner. No video recorders or cameras. No waves to onlookers. Most of the team's veteran players disembarked first, including center Jonathan Goodwin, who won a Super Bowl 3 years ago with the Saints. The 49ers will play Baltimore next Sunday, seeking their 6th Super Bowl crown. But first, since the 1994 season, the Ravens will arrive in New Orleans on Monday. All right. And best wishes to both teams. And that will do it for this edition of Sports Brief. And I'll be back later this afternoon around 3:30 with more details of the sports scene. Till then, back to you, Pandeng.
Thank you very much, Wang Dong. Indeed, on to other news. At least 40 people have been killed by severe flooding in Mozambique. Authorities have had to evacuate 75,000 people from towns and villages in the southwest of the country. The surge began upstream in South Africa, where it has caused extensive damage to farmland. In one extraordinary incident, more than 10,000 crocodiles escaped from a farm near the banks of the Limpopo River. Guy Henderson reports.
I was like, go boy.
Needless to say, don't try this at home. This is one of the smaller crocodiles. Farmers have literally been wrestling with 4.5-meter animals at times. It's dangerous, but their livelihoods depend on it. More than 10,000 escaped just over a week ago after the highest surge locals had ever seen. Farm manager Zane Langman says they tried everything they could.
We were basically opening gates to let flood waters in so that you had an inequality on the walls, so the walls didn't break. We didn't know that the water was going to go straight over the top of the pens. You know, we were hoping that at some stage it was going to stop going up, but the flood level just kept on increasing, and eventually they just went over the top.
The surrounding area is now infested with crocodiles that aren't afraid of humans. Scenes like this had caused public concern about cruelty. The animals are sometimes stunned. They're then being tied up and piled into trucks. But the NSPCA are here to assist. And with so many to rescue, they say, there's no other choice.
In my opinion, it would be depending on the size that would determine the method you would use. But for smaller crocs, definitely the most humane method would be physical restraint. These guys, really, they've been put in this situation. They've been working late hours, to try and get as much crocs back into the enclosure. But in my opinion, given the circumstances, they're actually doing a brilliant job.
Hunting continues at nightfall. This is a race against time to stop the reptiles dispersing too far. And it's easier to hunt, we're told. Eyes show up in the torchlight. Now, the farm have been searching for these crocodiles for nearly a week now, and it's 24 hours a day, day and night. They have captured several thousand, but there are several thousand more that they may never find. Zane believes recovery efforts will continue for months to rescue the business and try and reduce the inevitable long-term risk to humans. Even with the costly beasts recovered, though, there's fear of a repeat of the increasingly extreme weather patterns. Zane is just one of hundreds that are being affected. In Mozambique, this same surge has left at least 40 people dead, more than 75,000 displaced. The waters are receding. The effects will last for months. Di Henderson, CCTV, in South Africa's Limpopo province.
That's it for this edition of News Hour on CCTV News. I'm Pandong in Beijing. Bye-bye.
China need to introduce advanced technology to improve China's nuclear technology, also promote manufacturing industry. So that's why we introduced this AP1000 technology. Also after Fukushima, that also demonstrate this technology will be more important for future development.
For more insight on this, we're joined by Mr. Li Hong. He's the Secretary General of China Arms Control and Disarmament Association. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Li. So, what's the significance of this nuclear power plant?
I think there are at least two aspects for the significance of the sealing of the Xiamen nuclear power plant. First of all, it means that the pace of nuclear power construction has resumed to the normal pace after the Fukushima nuclear accident. As we know, after the Fukushima nuclear accident, the pace of nuclear development in China have been significantly slowed down just for the safety concerns. But now, after some period of overall safety inspection and also after the last October, the adoption of the Chinese nuclear safety plan, the pace seems to be resuming to the normal speed. Second, the sealing of the Xiamen nuclear power plant safety shell also indicates that China has mastered the key know-how and skills of the third
generation nuclear power plant. Our reporter Ying Yiyuan has interviewed the Managing Director of the Westinghouse Industrial Products and General Manager of China's State Nuclear Power Technology Corporation. Let's take a look.
Mr. Allen, so we know after Fukushima accident that different countries have different opinions on developing nuclear energy. But China and the US, both of them, they decide to increase the production of nuclear energy. So what are the reasons?
Well, we actually decided to continue. We had, even before Fukushima, worked closely. And during Fukushima, I actually was in Japan and lived through the experience. And so while we had already begun the projects here, both at Sanmen and Haiyang, after a short period of assessment, we concluded that SNPTC and Westinghouse would go forward because the safe conditions that AP1000 is designed for would withstand the kind of conditions that Fukushima occurred and created. So it endorsed what we had already started, and the design principles for passive safety and the work that we were doing together should go forward, and we have done this, and today is a big milestone towards that.
China is the largest developing country with a faster development of an economy. We need power energy. So nuclear power will change the China energy structure, relying mainly on coal to promote the environment condition, or also
Construction nears completion on China's first third-generation nuclear power station that is also the largest joint energy project with the United States. U.S. Special Envoy Glenn Davis and his Japanese counterpart meet in Tokyo. They urged the DPRK not to carry out a new nuclear test. Activists report more fighting between government forces and rebels around the Syrian capital Damascus. And protesters in Egypt defy a curfew ordered by the president, with many carrying out nighttime attacks on police stations along Suez Canal. Hello there, welcome to News Hour on CCTV News. Live from Beijing, I'm Pan Deng. China is on course to build its first ever third-generation nuclear power plant in Sanmen in East China's Zhejiang province. The technology at the core of the plant is known as AP1000, a US-developed third-generation technology that's at heart of the largest ever China-US energy project. Ying Yiyuan reports.
A last inspection for this 800-ton steel structure. This containment vessel will be lifted up to a height of 65 meters to cap the nuclear power unit. It marks the completion of the main structure. The reactor and the steam generator are already sitting inside, waiting to be installed. 3 years on from the beginning of the project, the security remains very tight.
We follow the rules of the U.S.
nuclear power plant. This is also a very important technical breakthrough for China.
Well, Mr. Li, how do you view China's nuclear energy development, especially on the area of safety and security?
For the nuclear power, I think it is the only way China has to proceed it forward, because we have large population, we have huge electricity demands, and as the economy continue to boom, we need more electricity. The demand is high. So at the current stage, the world's average percentage for nuclear power plant is 16% of the overall electricity capacity. But China at the moment is only 2%. So we need nuclear power plant, and the space for China is great to develop nuclear power. Meantime, safety has proven to be the key life of nuclear power. We have to attach more and more importance and attach allocate more resources for nuclear safety. And as for China's the challenges on safety, I think there are plenty of them. First of all is we have different approaches for nuclear power plant at different locations. Second, we have a very different kind of nuclear power reactors imported from different countries. The safety stance
U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, as well as China's own nuclear safety laws and regulations. Our team consists of talented people from both China and the U.S., and we have a comprehensive system of quality control.
Since Japan's Fukushima disaster, preventing cooling system failure has become a key safety priority for the nuclear industry worldwide. The Salmon plant uses U.S. AP1000 technology, otherwise known as third-generation nuclear technology. It means the plant's emergency cooling system can function without electricity for 3 days.
Third generation is, according to such kind of PSA analysis, is 100 times more safer than the generation 2. They can actually operate without any power, and they just be forced by the gravity, natural circulations, so they can make these systems works very well.
The Salmon plant will start generating electricity in 2014 and is expected to supply 15% of Zhejiang province electricity by 2015. It's a part of China's overall plan to increase the proportion of nuclear power to 4% by 2020, double the current level.
The electricity made by one nuclear unit here can save 3 million tons of coal and decrease carbon emissions by 8 million tons.
Different countries hold different opinions on nuclear power development, especially after Fukushima accident. However, developing clean and efficient energy is always a common goal for everyone, and ensuring safety is always a top priority. In Yuan, CCTV, Salmon County, Zhejiang Province.
For more on the